Billionaires and gadget aficionados are geeking out in Las Vegas over the International Consumer Electronics Show, or CES. It's the latest in home entertainment, high-tech engineering, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, you name it. Boom Bust Ed Harrison is on the ground in Vegas for this conference, but given how wild the markets have been this week, I first asked him what he makes of the positive ADP jobs report that was announced this morning in the U.S. versus how down the markets are. Take a listen.
So I think what's going on is that people are realizing, we had Raoul Pal who came on the show on Monday, and he was talking about the fact that there's a potential recession. I hear people now talking about revisions to Q4 that will take Q4 down to below 0%. The number that the Atlanta Fed has is at 0.7%. Private economists have been saying 2.0%. That's down from where they were before. They're at 3.0%, and now they're at 2.0%. We've seen companies like JP Morgan go down to 1%. So, it could be that we could throw in a negative number for Q4. And so what that means is, irrespective of whether or not jobs have been good, jobs are a lagging indicator in the economy. And so this 257,000 print that we had for the ADP number is perhaps a lagging number when you look at the inventory builds that we're having. These companies are trying to build off their inventories. They're trying to work them off. And this is going to be a drag on the numbers in Q4 and potentially for Q1. So that's why those things are happening at the same time. Plus, on top of that, you have China, you have North Korea, you have a lot of other data that's coming out that's generally negative, and I think that's really what has the markets concerned. You can see it's building up here in the background with CES.
That's right. And you mentioned China, you mentioned North Korea. Earlier this week we were talking about Iran and Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of different factors that investors are having to look at right now as they plan ahead. But I mean, you're at CES at the very least. There must be some sort of good news to give here. It's often been seen as sort of an intersection between jobs and technology. What CES sort of stands for. You've got a lot of billionaires out there. You've got a lot of entrepreneurs. I know that Gary Shapiro, he's the president of CES, he gave the keynote address talking a lot about just that, the place for jobs in the tech sector. You're there. What have you seen?
Well, I mean, look behind me. Everything's gangbusters. Even behind me, that's VW. That's a company that is under investigation by the U.S. government and could face huge fines. But everyone's totally upbeat. The technology sector is going forward. You were right, Gary Shapiro, who's the president of the Consumer Technology Association. He gave a very upbeat presentation earlier today, talking about the fact that jobs in the tech sector are good. The fact that innovation in the tech sector is creating productivity. We're not talking about just minor things, but healthcare in particular. We're talking about Fitbit. We're talking about things in terms of consumer electronics as well. In terms of the home, computers. So it's all across the gamut. What he's talking about is the Internet of Things. The fact that technology is not just today about consumer electronics, but rather it is about things that actually increase productivity, increase lifespans, and actually have a meaningful impact. So that's what he says, and he says that means that this is the place for jobs. I'm going to actually interview him hopefully for Friday's broadcast, so it'll be good to see what he has to say in a one-on-one conversation.
Right, and that's the future of where wearable technology is going. That's the future of where connectivity is going. You just used that phrase, the Internet of Things, because we're moving away from just having connectivity on our smartphones, connectivity through our laptops, but we're really moving toward a much larger space. And I'm hoping I'm not getting too off topic here, but I know that this is one of the stories that you've been following, which is Netflix and Dish and that debate over customization, privacy, how much accessibility we have, how much we can customize our entertainment consumption without sacrificing our privacy. What have you heard in that regard?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Those were two of the presentations I've been to today and yesterday, and I found them very fascinating in terms of people who are in the space, what they're trying to do. Both of them, I think, we're talking about customization, as you were saying, that they're looking to basically say, hey, we know what you're doing, you the customer, and therefore we can tailor what we're going to approach to give to you so that you have a better user experience. But of course, on the other flip side of that, my immediate reaction when I hear that is what about privacy? Is this the kind of data that could be used in a negative way for people. So, Gary Shapiro actually talked about this in his thing. He was talking about the bad guys, the privacy concerns, the naysayers, he called them, and the fact that, we have to actually take those things into account. Yes, there are going to be privacy concerns, but going forward, the biggest thing for me in terms of Netflix versus Dish is that Dish is not the owner of content. Dish is they're a provider, a network provider, versus Netflix. You used to think of them as a network provider. They used to give out DVDs, but now they're making their own content. The presentation from Netflix was much more dynamic, much more interesting from my perspective than Dish. And I'm an early adopter for Dish's new Sling TV that they introduced last year. But when they talked about Sling TV this year, it was incremental upgrades. It wasn't really that exciting to me. It really, where the rubber hits the road is companies like Netflix that can, start in one sphere, that is in terms of content delivery, and then move into content and then take all of the incremental revenue as a result of that.
Right, and I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to start throwing some dirt on Netflix or Dish one way or the other, but you mentioned something important, which is the incremental steps in innovation that we're seeing with companies like Netflix, companies like Dish, and they're not always the most exciting. And that's sort of the criticism that we're hearing about this year's CES, is that it's been to some extent sort of anticlimactic. I'm wondering if you're getting that sense, because this is a place where people come with billionaires are showing up. The leading innovators in the world are showing up here. Are you seeing anything that's really mind-blowing at this year's CES?
Well, what I saw, first of all, let me tell you about driverless cars for a second, because that's where the rubber hits the road for a lot of people. I talked about that a little bit yesterday. A lot of different companies are coming out. Right behind me, you see the auto stuff. Autos are big here. But one thing that I saw that was also big that I think is going to be an innovation is OLED technology, which allows you to make these little, it's like 3 millimeter thin screens that you can roll up and take with you. The durability of these screens is not there at the moment yet, but over time, this is what we're going to see. You're going to be able to have your screen, which is going to be like a 10-inch tablet screen, roll it up into a little thing, and then bring it out later on, and instantly you have like a laptop-like experience. So I think that there are interesting things that are out there, but on the whole, there's no real cutting-edge technology that is the here and now. So I think that's really the takeaway for me so far at day one from CES.